Morning. Glad to be here, and I hope that our study will be encouraging to each of us. We'll be studying beginning in Joshua chapter 3. Scott has done a good job of helping us see the overall perspective of where we are in history. How we got to the book of Joshua and the lifetime of Joshua. And I appreciate that a lot. I've put this question on the board for you to think about, and I hope you have been. I wonder what goes through your mind when you think about the Old Testament, what purpose it serves for you today. You know, we know the stories. I remember as a child my parents reading Bible stories to me, and most of us, if we're Bible inclined at all, we know those stories very well. But are they just simply stories, or is there something else that we need to derive from that? And that's where I want to begin with this morning. I think Scott has done a good job of helping us with that too. But there's just thousands of years that have already passed, and now we're down to this moment in time. Look at not working for some reason. I haven't done this for a dozen years, so hang on a second. Well, while he's trying to think it, there it is. There it is. Thank you, sir. Think about Jesus, his confrontation with the Jews, and the statement he made to them. You search the scriptures because you think that in them you have eternal life. And to me, that's a significant statement. They looked at scriptures. They tried to do their best in following them and being obedient to the Lord. And Jesus says, you think that in them you have eternal life. But he said, it's they that testify of me. And they refused to come to him. What happened when they refused to come to him? No life. Life is not in scriptures. It's not in the Word. Although it points us to that, points us to Jesus, but it's not in the scriptures. It's not in how good I am at understanding and believing that. It's my belief in Jesus Christ, so that you may have life, Jesus says. Then, in Romans 15:4, another significant statement to me, for whatever was written in former days was written for our instruction, that we through endurance and encouragement of the scriptures might have hope. It's in the scriptures. It's in what Jesus has said. It's in what he has promised to us that we can have hope. We have life through him, but we have that hope through him. And I've put this up there because I found it significant that the Jewish Bible uses the phrase, might patiently hold to hope. You know, I trust in the Lord, you trust in the Lord, but there are those moments in my life and in your life that kind of tug at our faith, tug at our hope, and that's what the Jewish scholars, I thought, really focused on. I think that's significant for me and you today. Many things that pull us away, but we need to have patience and in the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. Everything points to Jesus Christ. You've seen that before. I know you have. I've listed several things, and I'm sure there's things I haven't listed there that you can think of that really come to bear on who Jesus is, what his purpose was, what is to be going on in our life, what we should look for in these scriptures that we're studying together. I'm sorry, I messed it up, didn't I? But all of it, whatever you look at, and I really enjoy a study of the types and shadows of the Old Testament. But all these things point to Jesus. They're designed to give us life. They're designed to give us hope. Joshua chapter 3 now. I've quoted first 4 verses there. I want us to look at the points that are being made. Let me ask you this before we move on. Where would you be without hope? I think about the people that I see along the street sitting, begging, or just seems they have no purpose in life. I think it's a good indication of where their life is. They have no hope. Nothing promising good for the future. And that's what we have as disciples of the Lord. We can have hope that there's something better than what I'm experiencing right now. And I think that's really paramount as we look to Joshua chapter 3. He gives the instructions now for them crossing the Jordan into the Jordan into Canaan. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, as soon as you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, your God, being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place and follow it. Yet there shall be a distance between you and it about 2,000 cubits, about 2/3 of a mile. Do not come near it. Well, they could see the Ark of the Covenant. You think about 2/3 of a mile, how far that is. You can't see any detail, but you can see enough of it to know, okay, what do you know? I'll just stop and ask you, what do you know? By seeing the Ark of the Covenant, what do you know? God is leading the way. God is present, right? Jehovah is present. So when I'm following him, when I'm in his presence, that should give me hope, right? I think that's what we see from this passage. So don't come near it, in order that you may know the way. So you're following it. You're going after it, whatever version you have there. And look at the last phrase now. For you have not passed this way before. Let that come to bear on your feelings as well as the feelings of the Israelites at this point. What hadn't they experienced before? What had not happened in their life before?
As they began the conquest
Yes.
of the Promised Land, those were the 20 and down,
Good.
the babies.
That's right.
And so they had been circumcised
Right.
on the wilderness wandering.
And we're going to see that in a little bit, aren't we?
That's right. And next, they haven't seen the dividing of the Red Sea as their forefathers had, walking on dry land.
Good.
They're going to get to experience that same thing and learn that God can do wonderful and magnificent things that man can dream about.
What a refreshing attitude toward life we all could have if we looked at life like Joshua is telling these people. You haven't passed this way before. So, what should you do? Since you haven't been this way before, you haven't experienced what you're going to experience before, what should you do? Follow God's leadership. Be in His presence. Okay? So they could see, at a long distance, they could see His presence. But now follow that. Be in His presence. A lot of things they were going to experience. A lot of things they were going to see. A lot of places they were going to walk where they had never been before. What do we call that today? Adventure? Adventure? Some call it what?
I would call it spirit.
All right. Don't we all have a comfort zone where we feel comfortable walking? Where we feel comfortable functioning? God is saying to these people, Joshua is saying to these people, you're going to be outside your comfort zone. So get used to it. Trust the Lord. None of us like to step outside of our comfort zone, do we? None of us. But He's telling them, get ready for it. It's going to happen. You're going to walk where you've never walked before. You're going to see things you've never seen before. Be ready for it. The unexpected will come. So these unusual events, some of you have mentioned already, the older generation had experienced the plagues, but they're gone except for 2. They had experienced the Red Sea. And now think about Rahab. She's already been promised that something special is going to happen to her, for her and her family. Think about the hope that gives her, as well as the Israelites here. Joshua said to the people, consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Here are the unexpected things. Here are the things you've never experienced before. Here are the things that are going to be outside your comfort zone. The Lord is going to do wonders among you tomorrow. Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on before the people. So here's the presence of the God, their leadership for the people. Look at that phrase, sanctify yourselves. What do you think that means? Consecrate yourselves. What in the context of what's happening here, what were they expected to do so that they could work outside their comfort zone? So they could walk outside their comfort zone. What is involved in sanctifying yourselves? Consecrate yourselves. Excuse me? Dedication to God. To the absence of what?
Fear and doubt. We can't do it.
Yep.
But no one can visualize the power of Jehovah God.
Now, isn't that true of all of us all the time? As we live in the flesh, we're constantly faced with things that challenge us, tug at our faith, tug at our hope. And here, prepare yourselves, sanctify yourselves, because tomorrow the Lord's going to do wonders among you. Think about the Apostle Peter. When he sees, and the disciples see Jesus walking on the water, think about what Peter said and what he did. If you are the Lord, command me to come to you on the water. I'm paraphrasing. So Peter just gets out of the boat and begins walking on the water until what?
He lost his faith. He lost his faith.
He definitely lost his faith, but why did he lose his faith?
He didn't keep looking at Jesus.
All right. You've got the Ark of the Covenant in front of you. You have the presence of God here all the time. Now, if you take your focus off of that, probably something's going to happen you're not expecting. You're not wanting. Any of us strangers to that? We've all experienced it, haven't we? Begin walking by faith. Begin having our hope in the Lord. Things are going well, and all of a sudden, something materialistic grabs my attention. Takes my focus off of the Lord. Off of my faith in Him. And I don't know what I've done. Oh, yeah, I'm there. Okay. But I lose my faith. I lose my hope. And it's all over. Today, the Lord says to Joshua, I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that you may know, or that they may know, that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. That was a promise that the Lord, remember, had made to Joshua. Scott read that to us in chapter 1. He's going to be with Joshua as he was with Moses. And so now the Lord is speaking to Joshua again. I think it's significant that we keep that in mind. Jehovah is constantly reiterating his point, reminding Joshua so that he keeps his faith in the Lord. And so here he's promising again, I will exalt you in the sight of Israel, that they who? That Israel may know that I am going to be with you as I was with Moses. So now command the priests, stand still in the Jordan. Put yourself in the shoes of the priests now. I'm going to show you some pictures in a little bit here. Maybe I can move on down and... Well, I'm going the wrong way. How do I do that? I thought I was going backwards. There. I want you to look at that plain of Jordan. You see the camels coming down. That's unrealistic. That's not the scale. The city of Jericho, that's not the scale at all. But the picture shows us the valley of the Jordan. It shows us how wide this space is. About 2 miles across there between just the top of the Dead Sea. 2 miles. And that whole area is flooded. Rahab sees that. All the Canaanites experience it every year. Israel, for the first time, the younger generation is seeing this whole area flooded. That whole plain is covered with water. It's the flood season. And so now Joshua is telling the people, telling the priests, go stand in the Jordan. This is a flooded area, but you go stand in the Jordan. What do you think's going through their minds? What would go through your mind? Huh? You're telling me I have to go out there in the middle of that flooded area and stand? So faith is required of the priests, first of all, that God's going to take care of this some way. This is unexpected. This is something that they've never experienced before. You're going to go out there and stand in that Jordan. Here is how you shall know that the living God is among you. The ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into Jordan. I like that phrase, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you. He isn't just the Lord of the Israelites or of the priests. He's the Lord of all the earth. His ark is passing over before you. Think how that impacted the priests who were told, you're going to go out there and stand in the middle of the Jordan. How's that going to be possible? Nobody could do that at flood season, at the spring of the year. But they could have hope because the Ark of the Covenant was going to be there. It was going to be for them to follow. I went to the wrong way. As soon as the feet of the priest bearing the ark dipped in the water. Now this is a flood season. That's what is injected there. It overflows all of its banks through the time of harvest. The water stood and rose up in a heap very far away at Adam, place 15 miles north of Jericho. Uncertain about the exact location, but 15 miles approximately north of Jericho. The water just literally stood up. Stopped. During flood season, no less. And the people passed over opposite Jericho. Now the priest stood firmly on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel was passing over on dry ground. So as the priests come down to the Jordan, they're still seeing the flooded area. How are we going to go out there and stand? But the minute their feet touched the waters, all the water stood up.
Jay, it doesn't take any imagination at all to see that this is parallel to the first generation crossing the Red Sea, and now the second generation has crossed, quote, their Red Sea.
Right.
And we mentioned earlier that the second generation didn't have that first crossing to stand as a matter of their faith, but now they have this instance to test their faith, as it were. So God does for most of us what he does for previous generations. He may not be as dramatic now and do some of these things in miraculous forms, but he still brings us through our Red Seas.
He does.
Flooded Jordan River.
He does. And think about this. You just reminded me of something. There are two men in this whole company of people, approximately 2 million, two men who have experienced the Red Sea. They've experienced what the Lord has done when things are difficult, when man cannot function. They've experienced that. Do you think they're looking to those two men, and especially to Joshua, in faith? They should be, shouldn't they? Whether they are or not, they should be. Joshua's telling us to do this, and he's already been through the unexpected. And we should respect our older people like Jim here. we should respect our older people for the experience that they've had, the experience they've had with the Lord, having faith in Him. We should trust their leadership too. Anyway, let's go on to the next one now. I'm going the wrong way. I want you to see that across that valley, from Jericho to Abel Shittim, approximately 15 miles. I haven't found any place that really identifies that exactly, but 12 to 15 miles across that valley. And that is all the plain that was flooded. It's kind of interesting. Now they're up on a ledge, the edge of the valley. So they're not in the flooded area, those two places. They're camping at Abel Shittim, but they're going over to Jericho through the Jordan Valley. But I just wanted you to see the perspective of I can't hit the right one here. Now this shows us a cross section of Israel, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea on the left, the Jordan Valley, the Jordan River at the bottom, how much below that the Mediterranean Sea that is. I can't hit the right one, sorry. And there was a plain. Chapter 4, he says, take 12 men from 12 tribes, take 12 stones, and they're going to go from the Jordan Valley, from where the priest's feet are, in the middle of the Jordan, 10 days' time, approximately, to walk to Gilgal, their next camping place. And it's going to be a sign. A sign for what? Well, that the Jordan waters were cut off by Jehovah. And he exalts Joshua in the process. He says he's going to. Joshua told him to do it. Joshua was the leader. He exalts Joshua as the leader, having experienced this before. Compare that with what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10. He talks about Christ the rock at the Red Sea, the experience that the older generation have. Again, there's Jehovah leading. There's Jehovah dividing the waters, and that's what's going to happen now. 600,000 men, approximately, at this point. Approximately. If you give every man, you've probably heard this before, you give every fighting man, and I'm sure some were not married, but give every fighting man a wife and one child. One child is probably not even close to what they had. But anyway, you're talking about approximately 2 million people. Now take all that with the animals that were, and the herds that were going across. That just is amazing to me. This 2 million people, you have any idea how many 2 million people are in today's terms? Take all of Warren County, the population of Warren County, put them all together. Take all the population of Louisville, put them all together, and you have approximately 1.5 million. And we're talking about 500,000 beyond that, approximately. With all their animals, with all their herds, they're following together. I can't imagine a mass of people that large. Think of all the excrement they're walking through. Out in Auburn, one of my sons has a farm. It's in Amish or Mennonite territory. You see all this poop on the road, on the street. You have to walk around it or drive around it. Now multiply that by 2 million. Can you imagine walking and following together like they were? And they're approaching this valley 2 miles wide. Anyway,
Another thought.
I'm sorry?
So there's another thought that Paul is playing out. Our God, who knows everything, his enemy that he's going to take the land. These 7 heathen nations that God is going to
Yep.
have his wrath against in order to be able to give the children of Israel this promised land. They are witnessing.
They are.
The enemy's looking at it.
Yep. Yep.
They're scared.
Yep.
Because the power he is existing is showing. And they heard the reputation of what happened in Egypt, across the Red Sea, and they were fearful of that God. He has power.
We saw that last Wednesday when Scott took us through chapter 2, didn't we? Rahab. She had seen all this stuff. She had heard about all these conquests they had made, all these kings that they had killed. She knew. She knew there was something special going on. And she was seeking. She was seeking the Lord. I want to serve Him. He's obviously who I have missed in my life. So, great point. Great point. But anyway, they go into the Jordan there, and let's now. They've passed over. Joshua tells the priest, "You come up out of the Jordan." So now all the waters are stopped, but he tells the priests who are standing in the middle of the Jordan. Can you imagine being the last people to leave the Jordan Valley? What you might be thinking? Everybody's crossed over except me. What about me? They're still standing there. The water's still stopped. And Joshua says, "Come up out of the Jordan." And as soon as they did, as soon as their feet hit the place where the water had been, they were on dry ground and the waters overflowed. Significant that it's the 10th day of the first month. This is calendar speaking. This is the first Jewish month of the year. This is the spring of the year. This is when harvest is to begin. So they're coming up out of the Jordan at a significant time for the Jews. The Jews haven't experienced this before. We're going to see in chapter 5 the things they've not experienced, but this is the first month of the year. 12 stones are taken up, set up at Gilgal, and that's again on the crest of the Jordan Valley. And they said, when Joshua said, "When your children ask you, what do these stones mean?" What are they supposed to say? What are they supposed to rehearse to their children? What are they supposed to teach your children when they see these stones? And those stones were there. The waters failed. I want you to remember that, my child, my son, my daughter. I want you to remember that. The Lord was with us. Powerful message for all of us today. Joshua 5:1. I'm sorry, I've got my pages wrong here. As soon as the kings of the earth heard that Jehovah dried up Jordan, Israel crossed over. Their hearts melted. As he had suggested a little bit ago, they'd already seen all this stuff. And now there's more unexpected things happening. Things they could not imagine, Israel could not imagine. Israel's heart melted. And isn't that what Rahab said to the two spies? Our hearts melted. We had no more spirit in us. No hope. And that's what was supposed to happen. But Abraham's descendants were to return in that 4th generation. That's what the covenant that God made with Abraham was all about. You're going to leave the land of Canaan, but you're in the 4th generation, they're going to come back to this land. So at this point, there's no hope for the Canaanites, but think about those who trusted in God, those who looked to the Ark of the Covenant, those who followed the presence of God. Great hope for them, as long as their faith was in Him. In chapter 5, there are 3 special events I want us to look at. We don't have a lot of time left, but I want us to look at these 3 events that take place. The covenant of circumcision is renewed. It had not been kept. Over 40 years, circumcision not been practiced, so the newer generation, at least they had to be circumcised. Number 2, the Passover was reinstated. There's no record that I know of the Passover being kept all this time since leaving Egypt. Now, there may be something I'm not aware of, but the Passover hasn't been kept. So this is a new experience for the Israelites in keeping the Passover, this being reinstituted. And then the last thing in chapter 5 is Jehovah appears to Joshua. The covenant of circumcision. Verse 2 tells us that it was commanded by Jehovah. This was a sign. Genesis 17, this was a sign between Abraham and God, Jehovah, as a covenant. So, in order to reinstate your relationship with me, Jehovah is saying, you have to be circumcised. You have to have this covenant relationship with me. And that's what the circumcision was representing. New generation had not been circumcised, so now this is taking place. Look at verse 8. They stayed in the camp until healed. I don't know. Scott and I were sharing this yesterday. I don't know how long that was. But I know from the circumcision, there's several days recovery time until you're able to function again. So stop and think about, they stayed in the camp until they were healed. If they crossed over on the 10th, and that's what the scriptures say, then perhaps on the 11th, I'm just speculating, perhaps, I saw your eyes. It reminded me I dropped it. Perhaps on the 11th, circumcision take place. From the 11th through the 15th, which was the last day of the Passover, you have several days. On the 1st, on Sunday, following the Sabbath, they could have been ready. I don't know. It'd be a stretch, but they could have been ready for the first fruits. I'm just speculating with you. Anyway, they stayed in the camp until they were healed. And today, Jehovah says, I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt. What do you suppose the reproach of Egypt is? In that you've experienced this circumcision, today, now that you've been circumcised, I've rolled away the reproach of Egypt. What comes to your mind?
I think it was primarily the unbelief
Okay.
the Jews had in relation to Egypt.
Good.
They did not have faith, and therefore that entire generation died in the wilderness. Now the new generation must be circumcised, and in I think a symbolic way, this vitiates that lack of faith, all that had gone before to show the waywardness.
Yep.
There was a disgrace in the way they had dealt with things in many ways from the time of Egypt, especially up to the time of Kadesh
Barnea. Yeah.
Barnea, I'll get it out in a minute. There had been a time there when, for example, they had lacked faith in Egypt. they lacked faith when they were involved in all of the idolatry and adultery
Right.
around the building of the golden calf. All through here, they had great manifestations of faithfulness.
And they were out of covenant relationship with the Lord at that point.
Right. And God removes that.
Yeah, right. So now the sign that was between Israel and God has been restored. The relationship, the covenant relationship has been restored. And so now I'm suggesting to you they have hope. The Passover reinstated. Israel was encamped at Gilgal. They kept the Passover on the 14th day. Now here, the first day, or the 10th day, they'd passed over Jordan. On the 14th day, they kept the Passover. 15th day of the month. In the evening, and that's when it started, their day started in the evening, on the plains of Jericho, and the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate of the produce of the land. Unleavened cakes, significant statement, unleavened cakes and parched grain. And the manna ceased. The day after they ate the produce of the land, there was no longer manna for the people of Israel. They ate of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. Can you imagine? Can you imagine living 40 years? Now, Scott said he had done some research as to what they could have done with manna. I don't know. I don't know what he found. He told me what he found, but I don't know what evidence there is in the scriptures for that. He probably knows and share that with you. But one kind of food for 40 years. One set of clothing for 40 years. Never wears out. One set of shoes or sandals for 40 years. They never wear out. And we're concerned about every morning getting up and looking in the mirror and making sure that what we have on is going to look good. Our shoes aren't too worn out. But for 40 years, there seemed to be no thought for that. So they're now reinstituting the Passover on the 15th day. The manna is ceasing, and they ate of the fruit of the land. Now this is fruit that they have not planted, plants they've not prepared for, and they're eating of that fruit. These were the required feasts. The ones I have in blue are the first 4 feasts for the Jews. Yearly feasts. The Passover and the unleavened bread. The sacred Sabbath on the 15th. So the one before, on Friday, would have been a special Sabbath. Special convocation. But then on Sunday, the first of harvest, and that was when Jesus was resurrected. Remember, he was the first fruit, and that's what they did on that Sunday. They took of the first fruit that was devoted to God, first fruit of the land, waved it literally before the Lord in celebration of what the Lord had done for them. That was devoted to God. They couldn't eat it, but 50 days later, they're celebrating that whole time together. I'm running out of time, but let me move on here and hit this last one. Jehovah appears to Joshua, and he's done that over and over and over, reiterating his presence with Jehovah. He wants them to recall that I am with you. He wants Jehovah to know it. He wants Joshua to know it as well as the people. So don't be afraid. And Joshua is out there outside of Jericho, it seems to me, meditating, communing with God, which we all need. And all of a sudden, this man appears. Here's the unexpected event for Joshua. he appears. And Joshua is not intimidated. Joshua just walks up to him. The man has his sword drawn. Joshua just walks up to him and said, well, okay. Are you for us or are you against us? I am the commander of the army of the Jehovah. Joshua falls on his feet, or on his face, and he worships him. So here's the significance of who this person is, this man is, the presence of God. And he's taking off his sandals to recognize that presence. We'll begin with chapter 6 Wednesday evening. Thank you.